Welcome, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Battleship Cove. Thank you for joining to mark the grand opening of this important historical exhibit. We weren't expecting the weather to be quite as bad today, so we thank you for coming out. As president of the USS Massachusetts Memorial Committee, I encourage you to remember foremost our mission and what all these ships, aircraft, and exhibits stand for. We're about a month away from Memorial Day, a day when we as a nation pause to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. We often say around here that every day is Memorial Day at Battleship Cove, and today is no different. Before we begin our program, we'll ask for a moment of silence to remember our fallen servicemen and women. Among them, these brave PT boaters whose names are enshrined on the wall behind me. We have the watch shipmates. Rest in peace. Thank you. Let us also keep in our prayers the victims of last night's senseless violence in Indianapolis and their families. Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors whose generous support made this exhibit possible. New York Metropolitan Transit Authority, without question, was the driving force in preserving and saving these artifacts. Mr. Stephen Carter, whose personal generosity helped put this project in motion. Bristol County Savings Bank, represented here today by the Vice President of Commercial Lending, Mr. Richard Farmer. Blount Fine Foods, represented by Chief Growth Officer, Mr. William Bigelow. Central Insurance Companies, in cooperation with Hub International, represented by Mr. John Feidelberg, a longtime director and friend of this organization. And on behalf of Sueco Communications, and no stranger to Battleship Cove, former director and president emeritus, Mr. Carl Sueco. Deserving special recognition are Meredith Daniels of New York MTA and Memorial Committee Vice President Richard Angelini, along with our dedicated Corps of Battleship Cove volunteers and staff. At this time, I'd like to introduce our elected officials and distinguished guests. Former Congressman and guest of honor, Joseph P. Kennedy III, who's running about 10 minutes late, so we'll see Mr. Kennedy here shortly. Chair of the Massachusetts Senate Committee on Ways and Means, Senator Michael Rodrigues. Co-chair of the Massachusetts Joint Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development, Representative Carol Fiola. Representative Patricia Haddad. Representative and proud Marine Corps veteran, Alan Sylvia. Representative and proud Marine Corps veteran, Paul Schmidt. Mayor of the City of Fall River, Paul Coogan. And decorated veteran and treasurer of the Fall River Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall Committee, Dr. Jack Sprague. I'd also like to take this time to especially thank this outstanding group of public servants. From Congressman Kennedy to Senator Rodrigues, to our representatives, to the mayor and their staff members, all of them answered the call when Battleship Cove was in dire straits from the impact of the pandemic. Each and every one of them either met with us, visited us, or Zoomed with us, and through their cooperation and that of their colleagues, these historic landmarks and national treasures got some help that was needed to weather the storm. And now, to tell us a little bit about this wonderful exhibit and how it came to be, Chief Operating Officer Chris Nardi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to be as brief as possible. There are a lot of people to acknowledge in the creation of this exhibit. First of all, as Justin already mentioned, of course, it all started with the Metropolitan Transit Authority in New York City. She corresponded to our website, actually. I believe it started that way, and then Rich took up the correspondence, and it went from there. Rich Angelini, that is. From there, it was our volunteers taking 2 trips to New York City to retrieve the parts. They came back, we sorted things out, and they built this beautiful tank here. And I do need to mention, I know I'm going to forget someone, as we always do, but first of all, I want to acknowledge all the volunteers. They're listed in your program booklet. But this whole project was designed by a Mass Maritime first-class midshipman who's with us, hiding over there in the corner. His name is Joshua Fitzler, and we really appreciate his efforts. He spent a lot of his time while I was trying to study for school, designing this thing, both the construction and the engineering and the filtering system. So we really appreciate his efforts. Again, all volunteers. I also want to acknowledge the staff here at the Cove in terms of all the work they've done to put this together, and especially between the last week preparing this whole spot for this celebration today. I also want to acknowledge for the design work on these signs, starting with William Doyle, the author. I started with him. He referred me to Bill, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, even though I asked him how to pronounce it. Sorry, Richard Washachek, who's out on the West Coast and did all these beautiful drawings, the orthographic drawings that represent the construction of the vessel. And of course, Robert Brunel, who pulled all the signs together. Some of you here, or a lot of you here, may recognize him. So that's the design side of things. And on another consultant I want to mention is Shane Mcclain, who is the curator at Battleship Alabama down in Mobile. He is a prior to his curatorship there, he was a marine archaeologist who was instrumental in recovering the remains of the Civil War submarine, the Hunley. So we checked with him on some of the things we were doing, and he gave his blessing. And again, between he and Josh, we have a really good science experiment going on here. Just a bit about that. So the pieces were submerged for close to 50 years. They got infiltrated with chlorides, being in salt water. When chlorides dry, if we had left this exposed to plain air, the chlorides would have dried out, expanded, and destroyed what's remaining of the pieces here. So that's why they're submerged. It's a filtered system. Unfortunately, one of the filters broke last week, and it's not being filtered at the moment. But once the chlorides are filtered out, we'll replace we'll infiltrate we'll put a solution there of what's called PEG, which is a wax-like substance that will re-support the structure and it'll be able to stand on its own. So our plans are to get this out of the tank at some point and have it as a standalone exhibit between her two sisters. With that, I will turn it over to, I think I've covered that pretty well. Any questions real quickly about the tank or anything before we continue? Okay, I'll turn it back to Justin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Michael Rodrigues.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Congressman, it's great to see you also. Thank you very much for coming, and my esteemed colleagues in the state legislature, the mayor of the great city of Fall River, and so many friends that are here that support Battleship Cove here in Fall River. And we had a great meeting. This is, frequent flyer this week, Justin, you and your team. We've had a number of great meetings this week. And at the meeting, Battleship Cove and the USS Massachusetts was described as our Statue of Liberty here in Fall River. And I'm never going to forget that. And I told him I was going to use that because it's true. Countless generations now, just picture in their vision of Fall River as the great battleship and the ships as part of the collection. And we have been working very, very hard collectively to ensure that not only are the ships protected and preserved, but that the history and the legacy that they represent gets added to. And this PT-59 is just an amazing addition. Of course, at my age, I grew up reading about the heroic exploits of President Kennedy, and I always say that one of my first memories of something political was on the Sunday after President Kennedy was assassinated, going to my grandmother's house. As you know, as Portuguese, we go to Vovo's house every single Sunday for dinner, and going to my grandmother's house, and she and everyone was crying, literally weeping, because, again, in traditional Portuguese homes, on the wall, there were always two portraits, right? I'm sure, Representative Sylvia, you had the same two portraits at your home, the Pope and President Kennedy, because of what he had done to support all the Portuguese immigrants when he was then a U.S. Senator, even before he was president. So I'm happy to be here. You know that the battleship has my unwavering support to continue to continue to improve and build upon your legacy here in great city of Fall River. Thank you.
And a warm welcome for Representative Carol Fiola.
Thank you, Justin, to the board members, to guests, the military, congressmen, my colleagues in government, on behalf of myself and my Marine colleagues, State Representative Paul Schmidt and Alan Sylvia. It's such a joy to be here. And unlike my colleague, Senator Rodrigues, well, first of all, like my colleague, Senator Rodrigues, you have our unwavering support for the battleship. It is an icon, it's our Statue of Liberty, and we cannot imagine from the days, John, your dad, being a part of bringing this great battleship here to Fall River, that we could ever not look out and see this battleship making us proud. So we're here for you. But unlike my colleague, who was a great history, a knower of history and learning about the president's wartime, perhaps, I was always interested in the Plud's cake at the wedding, following your great aunt's, adventures and that aspect of things. When we were invited here today, I took some time to study a little bit about PT-59 and Lieutenant Kennedy at the time's journey. And I was really amazed. And my goal today is, and moving forward, is to hope that a lot of the younger people as well have an opportunity to understand what an incredible journey both PT-59 had and President John F. Kennedy, then Lieutenant Kennedy. PT-59 was born and then, I'll say, laid to rest 12 miles from each other, from Melville down in Rhode Island and now here in Fall River, 12 miles apart from where she was born to where she will live in infamy here in Fall River. That's really amazing. And then to follow the exploits of PT-59, and then when Lieutenant Kennedy took board and had approximately 13 missions, saved 10 Marines from the famous, I think it was Blissful Operation, if that's what it was called. Yep, Blissful Operation. They gave them interesting names. I don't think it was too blissful out there, but, and then his subsequent health issues as a result of his heroic duties. And it's just amazing. And then to watch the vessel, the boat, turn from a PT boat to a gunner boat, and then end up a fishing boat, and then end up sinking, and then being discovered and found in the New York Harlem River is just an incredible journey, and then to end up back here where she belongs, alongside other Kennedy beloved vessels. I think it's an important story to think that our president, and again, I go back to my beginning remarks about following his wife and following him as a handsome, famous president, he was a hero. He was a Navy hero. And this vessel helped enshrine that moment in his career, that we know him not for that, but as President of the United States. And so I was fascinated. I hope Justin and all of you, you are allowing this to be shared with the rest of the world. And it's an important part of history. And I think many will enjoy it for years to come. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rep. Viola. And now the mayor of the city of Fall River, Paul Coogan.
Obviously, this is a real honor to be down here today with all the representatives, Schmidt, Sylvia, Fiola, and Mike Rodrigues, and celebrate another very, very valuable addition to Battleship Cove. This is going to be a real nice piece for people to come see. I also want to thank Senator Rodrigues and especially his efforts as champion of the arts for the city, along with our new tourism chair, Fiola. This can be a valuable place for us to come down and have events, concerts, things like that, and we're going to try to move it along. I also want to thank former Congressman Joe Kennedy for coming down and joining us on this occasion, and his tireless efforts when he was our congressman on behalf of all the residents in the city of Fall River. As I'm sure everyone knows, the Battleship and Battleship Cove Museum have been a crown jewel for the city of Fall River for a long time, and I especially also want to thank the Metropolitan Transit Authority for making this new exhibit possible. Coupled with the growth along our waterfront and the opening of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall next month, Fall River is quickly becoming a destination for people of all ages and backgrounds, especially veterans and their families. It is an honor to be the mayor of a city with such a rich history and appreciation for all the work our veterans did and all the sacrifices they made. As we emerge from this COVID-19 pandemic and look forward to inviting more visitors to our waterfront and to enjoy the Battleship Cove exhibits, I am excited by what lies ahead, and I am very excited by what lies ahead for the city of Fall River and, of course, Battleship Cove. Thank you very much.
And I think next we're going to have joining us remotely is historian and author of PT-109, Mr. William Doyle.
Thank you very much. I am the author of a book called PT-109, and for my book I came across the story of the PT-59, an attack craft that John F. Kennedy commanded for 3 months in 1943 after the loss of the PT-109. On this boat, John F. Kennedy rescued under fire 10 Marines on a South Pacific island who were being chased into the ocean by enemy infantry. One Marine died on this boat, a man by the name of Corporal Edward James Schnell of Wilmette, Illinois, died in Kennedy's bunk during the rescue. Kennedy almost never spoke of these events again. I learned that incredibly after the war, PT-59 was sold to the civilian market as military surplus, converted to a fishing boat and a houseboat, and abandoned in the Harlem River, where the remains slowly sank into a mud flat. In 2017, following clues developed by Dick Washachek, who you're about to meet, and his colleagues on the ptboatforum.com, I led a small team to the site, cut off tiny samples, and had them tested. I made the mistake of climbing out of our boat and trying to approach the remains on foot, but the mud was quicksand that pulled me hard and fast straight down into it. I was pulled back into the boat, kicking and screaming, I'm afraid. The samples tested as wood that was used in PT boat construction and other clues strongly indicated that this was the PT-59. Last summer, I joined as an observer the amazing recovery operation of the remains of the PT-59. I want to salute the superb work done by Bob Laga and his team at the Metropolitan Transit Authority and Walsh Construction and Battleship Cove and Dick Washachek and the ptboatforum.com for their efforts to identify, rescue, and preserve this priceless artifact of American history. Thank you.
What a story. I never knew about it.
Representing the New York Metropolitan Transit Authority, Mr. Robert Lava.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Laga, Program Officer for Recovery and Resiliency at the MTA. As a project manager who has worked in construction and development for years, I've dealt with site issues that could potentially delay construction and plenty of debris that needs to be cleared before work can resume. But never did I think back in June 2020, while building a seawall at 207th Street Yard, my team would discover a boat commanded by JFK. This will certainly be the most memorable projects I've ever worked on, and I'm glad I can see the final reveal of the fruits of our labor on this, and feel good that the remains of PT-59 have a new forever home. I'd like to thank the Battleship Cove Museum, who came down to New York not once, but twice, and really worked swiftly and carefully to identify and retrieve the remaining parts of the vessel. And I'd like to thank Bill Doyle for joining us and giving us the history lesson of a lifetime. I know this was a great experience for him as well. And my bosses at the MTA, led by Jan Oliver, President of Construction and Development, as well as our contractor, Walsh Construction, for being so understanding about having us take the time for the right organization to salvage these pieces as we paused construction to do so. The pieces didn't really fit to the design of our seawall, so, we had to rely on the museum guys to make the most of it, and they have. So congratulations on preserving a piece of important naval history and for your continued work and dedication to your craft. Hope we can take a little field trip up to the museum and see the exhibit in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Kittredge Professor, of Naval History at the Naval War College, Commander, United States Navy retired, Mr. David Conan.
Well, I have some prepared remarks. I'm told that I have 10 minutes, but if I do see the white cane to pull me off the stage, I'll be able to stop very quickly. Today, I'm very proud to have the opportunity to talk to you about the PT-59. In very broad strokes, I'm just pleased to offer some remarks about motor torpedo boats in general term from a historical perspective, but also highlight the fact that PT-59 is really better known to us than we think. As we all know, PT-59 once sailed under the command of a young naval officer named John F. Kennedy. Growing up in Iowa, I first learned about President Kennedy from my grandfather, Patrick Eugene Duffy. A proud Irishman in his own right, my granddad served with the 1st Rangers in the Mediterranean area of operations in 1942-1943. He was wounded twice in combat and actually operated off of a boat just like the PT-59 during the Berserk raid. That's where he got his $1 million wound. My granddad fixed cars for a living and was straight ticket FDR Democrat, and he adored John F. Kennedy. He kept a portrait of him, drank a customary toast to the late president on St. Patrick's Day. And John F. Kennedy certainly deserves to be remembered for his great service in pursuit of FDR's dream of the 4 freedoms in both peace and war. In my own collection, I have a first edition of his great book, While England Slept. Kennedy makes a great point in this book. The importance of being prepared for war, the focus should be on the preservation of peace. As a former naval officer myself, I also hasten to note that Mr. Kennedy also provided personal inspiration for me with his often cited and perhaps mythologized quotation, quote, "I can imagine no more rewarding career. Any man who may be asked to, in this century what he did to make his life worthwhile, I think I can respond with a good deal of pride and satisfaction. I served in the United States Navy." As we ponder Kennedy's words, I would also note that the story of PT-59 is much better known in popular American memory than we actually know. Indeed, the book and the movie portrayals of Kennedy's familiar adventures in the Navy are largely derived from his exploits while the skipper on the PT-59, not PT-109. From a technical standpoint, the PT-59 was different than the more famous PT-109. Both hulls were built at the Elko factories in New Jersey, but PT-59 was an earlier design, an S-class subchaser type with a 77-foot length and about a 19-foot beam and a 4-foot draft. She could run about 41 knots, about 65 miles an hour, and could turn on a dime. Originally fitted with an enclosed wheelhouse, the guys on the boat actually fitted the boat so that it could have an open cockpit when they were in combat conditions. It gave better visibility. You can see these types of 77-foot Elco boats in the old wartime movie Crash Dive, which happened to be filmed in color, Kodachrome color, so you can really get a sense of these boats. It's a boats just exactly like the PT-59. Reserve Ensign David Levy commissioned the PT-59 as part of Motor Torpedo Squadron 2 right down the road in Bayonne, New Jersey, but he brought the boat up here to Melville, where they did training here in the greater Narragansett Bay under the supervision of none other than Medal of Honor winner John D. Bulkley. And one of the great things about John D. Bulkley is he had this idea that if you operate PT boats in tandem together, you can actually take down bigger targets in combat operations, and they developed procedures to do that. So when Levy commissioned the PT-59 into service, they worked up and they actually sailed the boat down to Miami and then into the Panama Canal Zone, and they hopped a ship that was a Liberty ship that was named after Roger Williams. So there's a lot of Rhode Island connections built into the history of the PT-59. Being a junior officer, Levy served as the XO, a reserve lieutenant, under the command of Robert L. Searles, who assumed duty as the skipper of the PT-59 once they got out to the Pacific. Having graduated from Princeton in 1938, Searles actually cut the wake of an Ivy Leaguer, highly articulate and straight out of central casting for the idealized image of what a naval officer would look like. Searles and his brother Robert actually are both PT boat guys, and they were later featured in a Life magazine cover during the War Bronze drives of 1943. But in 1942, Searles in the 59 boat during the Solomon's Guadalcanal campaign actually intercepted an enemy landing force in Kamambu, I'm not saying it right, Kamimbo Bay, and they actually sank the Japanese submarine I-3 with their torpedoes. We're not done yet. They went in, they actually boarded a Japanese landing craft, seized intelligence from the barge itself, and before they left, they blew it up, thereby stopping the Japanese from having a withdrawal. So for these heroics on board the PT-59, Searles received the Navy Cross. He did later write about these experiences in his memoir, Tales of Tulagi. Searles and his brother also remained in the PT service and went over to the European theater, conducting operations in the Mediterranean, where my grandfather was also. So beyond that, Searles continued and operated off the landing forces, doing special operations during the D-Day landings. Long before Pearl Harbor, as a member of the General Board of the Navy, Admiral Ernest J. King advocated for the construction of these small, fast motor torpedo boats. He thought that they could be used not only for attack, but also for anti-submarine operations. A former torpedo boat skipper himself, he also knew the value of smaller, high-speed warships. He considered PT boats to be the ideal platforms for educating, basically, civilians in uniform to serve in combat operations in command roles. So you see a lot of reserve skippers from the reserve ranks as skippers of these PT boats in the history of these squadrons. Again, having won the Medal of Honor for his exploits in the Philippines a few months before, John D. Bulkley is, the guy who really trained up the PT boat squadrons right here in the greater Narragansett Bay area. And of course, he's depicted in the movie They Were Expendable. He was played by Robert Montgomery, who was also a PT boat guy. So there's a lot of great history built into this residual of the PT-59. I hasten to also mention that Searles and those other PT boat guys that I mentioned served with Douglas Fairbanks, another actor who was affiliated with the PT boat service. So, PT-59 is actually a much bigger story than we initially think, particularly because it is a story that is largely inspired and mythologized in the depictions of PT-109 in the movie version of JFK's service as a skipper out in the Southern Pacific. Having endured the loss of PT-109 after the collision with the Japanese warship Amagiri famously in August of 1943, Mr. Kennedy fought to stay in the combat zone despite festering wounds that would persist for the rest of his life. Setting aside the famous coconut stories of PT-109, Kennedy took the PT-59 and retrofitted it to serve as a gunboat. He was planning to operate right up against the enemy in the littorals, the green water, and using small arms and maneuver to attack them, basically bring the fight to the enemy. So when Kennedy was raising the crew for the PT-59, he mixed up some of the survivors from the 109 crew. He grabbed some of the guys from the already existing PT-59 crew that served under Searles, and then he went around and charmed a few other sailors and probably shanghaied a few to serve on the gunboat. And one of the things that they did the hard work of retrofitting the PT-59 into service, fitting two 40-millimeter Bofors guns that was their big gun, 4 and a half. They had 2 of those. They had 6 50 caliber machine guns, and of course, wanting to get into the fight himself, Kennedy had mounted 2 30 caliber guns on the bridge where he was. Not only that, he reinforced the decks. I don't know if you've studied if the decks are here, but they reinforced the decks to accommodate more 60-millimeter mortars. So I mean, they were fitting this boat out to have a fight. He really wanted to get some, as we say out in the fleet. In the movie version of Kennedy's service out in the Southern Pacific, as portrayed by the award-winning actor Cliff Robertson, it's primarily based on Kennedy's very brief tenure in command on PT-59. In October of 1943, Kennedy famously volunteered to go into the shallows to relieve a group of paratrooper Marines on Vela La Vela in the Solomon Islands. In an epic display of heroism in the littorals, Kennedy piloted the PT-59 as Marine Colonel Victor Krulak guided the force into the area. Kennedy and his sailors provided indirect fire support to the embattled Marines as they withdrew from a vastly superior enemy force. Operation Blissful proved to be a success, as the Marines successfully spoofed the enemy into thinking that this had been the main assault. In fact, these operations were a diversion to enable the decisive landings at Bougainville. As depicted in the PT-109 movie version, PT-59 operated at maximum range to get the job done. As they were withdrawing from the area, the boat actually ran out of gas, and they had to get assistance from another boat that was in the area. They got towed and they refueled, and a group of Australian-flown P-40s actually provided air support. Unfortunately, those P-40s were shot down during those actions. I covered a lot of ground here, but I think I've illustrated that the combat out in the South Pacific was real combat. Not only that, PT-59 is really a major inspiration for what we see in the movie versions of Kennedy's exploits. And one of the things that I would I've jotted down some notes here that I'll just sort of riff off of. You know, the 4 freedoms, the ideas of democracy and freedom for all. These are some of the ideas that John Kennedy and those PT boat guys were fighting for out in those bloody battles of the Pacific. Let's not forget that those early battles were truly melees. They were battles that you had to commit yourself to, and you had to win. And they bought the time that was needed for the guys who ultimately landed at Normandy in '44, and the guys who followed in the Central Pacific Drive, and then of course up into Okinawa, and finally in 1945 we were able to have victory at sea. I grew up watching those movies and those documentaries, and my grandfather Duffy inspired me to want to serve as well. So with that, I am deeply honored to be here, and thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my remarks.
Thank you, Commander. What a great job. That was some fascinating information, much of which I didn't know. And now, it is my great pleasure to welcome our guest of honor, Joseph Kennedy.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is an absolute honor for me to be here with all of you on a beautiful spring day. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. There's 3 inches of slush on the ground in Boston. Happy springtime. In all seriousness, there's no weather that would keep me away from all of you this afternoon. A few quick thank yous before we jump in. Justin and Chris, we're so grateful for your incredible leadership here at Battleship Cove, for the thoughtful stewardship you have provided to this sacred site. Senator, it's good to see you. Representative, it's good to see you. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you. Representative, all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership over all of those years, and thank you for your leadership to this place. Mr. Doyle, Mr. Laga, out there in virtual land, and Dr. Conan, I just learned an awful lot too, so thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this such a special day. And one last important thank you from me. It's to all of the volunteers that make this place so special. The hours of endless love that you put into the site that keeps it a national landmark and a place of such meaning to the many that have served and to their families. I'm grateful, and so are many others. Folks, I will be brief here, I promise. But as you can imagine, this is a special place for me too. I've often struggled to find the words to describe what it means to see a boat inscribed with my namesake. But for anyone who comes from a family that has served, you can attest to how much the concept of a memorial matters. How much it means to remember, to preserve the sacrifice of those who came before, so it will never be in vain. And how truly generational that work is, and for a family to pass that on amongst themselves forever. What has always struck me about Battleship Cove is that you could not pick a better home for this site, the entire continental United States, than Fall River, Massachusetts. I had the privilege of representing this community in Congress for many years. It's a place that I came to know well, I feel tied to in a way that happens when you do more than just spend time somewhere, but find kindred spirits that share the values that you were raised on. I know that Fall River is a place of hard work, of loyalty, of service and devotion, and of sacrifice. This city has given so much to our cause of freedom. So many brave men and women. Specialist Scott Andrews, Army National Guard Sergeant Robert Barrett, Army Private Michael Boutet, Army National Guard Private Ethan Gonzalo, Marine Corporal Paul Fagundes, Sergeant Jason Poole, Sergeant Eric Emmond. Just a few of the names that I've come to know during my time in service to this community. And reminders of how dearly you all remember and honor those who gave their last measure of devotion in service of this city. Bicentennial Park, Veterans Memorial Bridge, the Sergeant Robert Barrett Post Office, the Sergeant Specialist Scott Andrews Memorial Arts Center, and countless others. So no, there is no better final resting place for PT-59. Books have been written about how formative my great-uncle's time in the Navy was to him, how much it mattered for him to serve, how much he experienced in those years, and how they would change him forever. How there were a few places where he felt more alive and at peace and at purpose than being at sea and fighting for the country that he loved. He was a hero. But his story, that part of his story, is not that exceptional, not here. It's the same devotion that was carried by any brave man or woman who gives everything of themselves so the rest of us can live safe and free. So more than John Fitzgerald Kennedy, more than any one man or woman or moment or act of heroism, may the remains of the vessel that we come here today to celebrate, may they continue a beautiful tribute that this place pays homage to every day, to all those who don a uniform in our defense. Thank you all, from me and my family. God bless you, our troops, and our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. This concludes our presentation for today. And how about a round of applause for all the speakers, the volunteers, and staff, and our whole team here at Battleship Cove. Please take some time to visit PT-617 if you'd like to go aboard and take some photographs, get warm. Probably is on everybody's mind right now. But again, I thank everybody for coming out today for this fantastic ceremony. Thank you.
There are refreshments down just that way, back towards where you came in. Nice job.